I'm Annkur Khosla, principal of Annkur Khosla Design Studio. We are a bespoke design studio based in Mumbai, and what we believe in our philosophy is to create soulful spaces which contribute and add more value and meaning to our project through the medium of design. The client had approached us with 3 tiers of apartments in a residential complex in Mumbai, and one of the apartments on the ground floor overlooked a landscape space. So, placing the context of the project, it was almost like a rectangular block with slight protrusions of rectangular spaces, and the very interesting part of it was in the ground floor, an entire landscape space which kind of protruded out. So contextually, the neighboring plots of this project were separated through landscape, and way beyond this landscaped area we had a huge garden and a football field which dropped down in height. So visually, what you saw from this project was per se a dome of the ITC or a chimney in far beyond in Lower Parel, and literally one felt as if one is in the oasis in Mumbai, which is such a rare feeling. So the most important part of the house was the core of the house, which was going to be the staircase. Ideally, you notice that most people try to put it on the front face or towards the area where the light could come in, for instance, more so like the north light could penetrate in. But what we thought, we'd do the reverse, which is really use the dead end of the project and try and make that as the staircase core, which allowed for an interesting aspect, because how would light really penetrate into the core? So that is something that we show, how the screens and how the elements of the walls allow for light to perforate and fall into the staircase foyer throughout the floors. So coming to the ground floor, what we really decided was, how do we metaphorically explain interconnectedness? We started playing with geometric forms, and we said that when you place 2 forms together, they just overlap in 2D. If you really want to show connections and bonds, we thought, why don't we extrude the forms and create a whole pattern and a language out of it? So that became our screen, and that became the element which became the burgeoning, beginning part of this entire project. So what you see is there is a screen which is made of extruded forms, which acts as a jali, as well as you have this entire huge circle which acts like a window and aperture to run a conversation for the woman of the house. So this became a very interesting feature for the project. What we next thought was, how do we take this further? It became in the form of another, like a rectangular form, which again became an extruded form into a smaller aperture, so that the client could run the conversation between the dining space to an informal seating area. What we also thought is, how do we reinvent these forms that we're creating? So we said that let this aperture become a floating screen from the ceiling, and let it become like a semi-buffet table. So it added functionally as well as aesthetically to the project. This geometric form of the screen also was something that we used as an element of a door handle. What we also thought, that railings of staircases are something which are very undermined in architecture. So we even created one of these extruded forms to act as a railing for the staircase while you're going up. What was also very interesting was the entire landscape portion, which was the external boundary wall. Since this project is located in a gated community, and security was not such an issue, so we thought that why not create that interconnectedness and perforated feel through an amoeboid shaped lace fence which kind of bordered the entire landscaped area, and it also allowed the visual connect. Generally, compound walls tend to get extremely heavy and kind of create a strong division of space. So moving on to the first floor, the entire rectangular plot started expanding towards the southwest corner. So if I had to allocate a north to the project. It was an inclined north, with the north placed here, east. The important part over here was to negotiate space from the ground floor to the first floor. We had to do a very quick U. And when we were landing up the staircase, we said, how do we create almost like a carpeted feel through stone? So that was one of the strong elements of design. And what we also considered was, how do we allow the light to pour into the staircase area? So if you notice that there is again a perforated wall which allows for circular openings. So they become again windows and apertures for forming connection, as well as for allowing light to function. So the ground floor was more about having public spaces. The first floor is a more semi-public space. So we wanted to create partitions and screens which could open up and allow for separate spaces as well as interconnected spaces. So the entire concept is very consciously being carried on, and it's unveiling itself throughout the entire project. So moving on to the second floor, which again had a rectangular base with projecting small rectangles. Here we had a little bit more freedom of space. So if you realize, we were able to create a more U-shaped staircase in order to climb up. So that allowed for a larger winding area. And again, if you notice, to get in the light into the core of the staircase foyer, now we created a wooden screen which was in the area of more informal sitting place for one of the bedrooms. So this again, in a very dynamic form, allowed for light to filter into the core. So the interiors in terms of the rooms and the toilets all have a story to tell. So coming to the powder toilet, what we did was we scooped out a space, and again taking on the aperture concept, it was almost like a mosaic created in a Byzantium window overlooking the city skyline. So that formed as an interesting backdrop for the WC location. And then taking on to the master toilet, even that was a huge room allocated for dressing and for the purpose of a toilet. And it also allowed for a connected walk-in wardrobe. We had this interesting dumb waiter which went from the kitchen to the upper floors to service, to provide that quick, ready access to items to serve. And what we did with the kids' toilet was also, it was like a marquetry done in stone. And it was almost like a girl's dressing room of sorts, like a boudoir with some art and small step spaces. So what we tried to do even with the rooms was really create an interesting marquetry of wood flooring and create more larger open spaces, because we thought a wood is also an element which allows for the connection to nature, the inside and the outside feel which we wanted to establish. And what we've done is also we've used art very interestingly. You do not find it at the most typical spaces just behind a sofa. You may walk through the staircase area and find an artwork of shoe stumps by Samantha Batra, which kind of start accessing itself at the staircase corner, or it starts at a wall and it goes on the underside of a beam. So those are also ways to create an element of surprise. We have a very interesting tiled artwork by Fariba Alam, and that is more towards the corner of one of the staircase areas, and it really moves up to the ceiling mildly. So we thought that art is also a medium to create dialogue and conversation. And that has been the very strong element of the entire project, because we feel dialogue and conversation can lead to harmony in living and between individuals.